I'm as sort of naive to what we're going to be discussing on the panel as everybody else here, because the whole point about this weekend is it's very spontaneous. So that's the plan anyway. But the one thing that binds everybody together is creativity. I think we will all agree there. And everybody on this panel has actually, and this wasn't deliberate, has actually been on our show Rise, which is, so I do have some insider knowledge about these wonderful people. So I would like to start off, first of all, asking, well, each one individually about their journey. And I think that's really important, because what we know, and Bob, you and I touched upon this earlier, is that over the last 3 years, if there's been one area that has been completely remiss in speaking out against what has been going on, it's been the creative arts industry, an absolute failure. And everybody here on this panel, I'm glad to say, is a truth seeker. And so really, I want to start off, perhaps it might be a bit negative, but what do we feel we have sacrificed in order to be able to be here today in many respects? So, Bob, you're as good as anyone to start with this. Now, obviously, you became very well known for being an artist and illustrator on the Daily Telegraph. There was a very public falling out that we all heard about, but you continued to stand up. What does it cost you, Bob?
I don't know if my voice is strong enough to just shout at this point in the festival. What does it cost me? I mean, the thing is, as Alan Partridge would say, I've bounced back, so things are going okay now, you know, but for a while, I thought it might have cost me everything, because I had a very, very secure job that I'd worked for years to get to. I'd been at the Telegraph for 10 years, and I'd finally got a full staff contract with them, so I had a pension and paid holiday and all the things I never thought I would get, and I had a young family and a mortgage to pay. And so when I was fired, which was to an extent I expected it, because there'd been a lot of tension, but at the time when they suspended me, my solicitor said, look, this isn't a sackable offence, you don't need to worry. So it did come as a bit of a shock, and it could well have ended everything. I had no guarantee that I would be able to carry on at all. But I thought, and I was told I had grounds to sue them for unfair dismissal, but I didn't really want to do that, because I felt I wanted to move on, and it's a lot of stress and money and everything. So I thought, well, the way to get back at them is just to survive and keep going, to be successful. But I was only able to do that because of this movement and, all people like you who kept supporting me, so thank you.
Graham, can you give me a hand? Won't be a moment.
Brad, you've had a slightly different journey, obviously, and I think many people here will know the songs that Brad has written and performed to do with Fauci, which are just fabulous, Sad Little Man being one of them. So yours is very much a sort of musical, political journey. Has that cost you, or have you gained more than you've lost, do you think?
Do jump rope here. I've gained a whole lot more now. Okay. I was thinking as Bob was talking that when I started speaking out, I was telling my wife for months that I was either burning down everything I ever worked for, or I was building something new. And at some point, it shifted where I go, I think I am building something new. And I think it happened, at the beginning. I had been a songwriter for 20 years, so I had this big swath of fans that were really pissed, that I started saying something different. And I would get these angry emails and messages, and I'm deleting your music, and, I'm not listening to you anymore. You're a nut. And, but every time I'd get one of those, I'd get a few more messages from new people. And they would say, thank you for speaking up. Thank you for saying what you're saying. And that told me that, I wasn't alone. And as these people over here would send me, little by little, one little message here and I'd get 10 more positive messages. And so that encouraged me to say, you know what, I'm going to just keep leaning into it and keep speaking out and saying it. Because when I started speaking out, I thought, I'll just do this one song. It was called God Help Us All. And I was like, I'm just going to say what I want to say, and that'll be it. And I'll probably move on. But then the feedback from all these, from people like you, it let me know that I wasn't alone. So I thought I just need to keep going here. And that's what I did. So I've gained something incredibly valuable in the process. I think we all have, which is just this new fanship that's even better because we're all working towards something together. It's not just that, oh, I like your song. It's that you're helping me do what I want to do as well.
Right. I should also say it was Brad's birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Brad. So what you've both discussed really is an almost breakdown leading to a breakthrough, right? That's what you're both talking about. Robin, again, another sphere, filmmaker and architect. And you are responsible for the Book of Vision, right? It's the Book of Vision, isn't it? Which is a beautiful film. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's a beautiful film. So tell us about your journey and whether this was... I think for some people, this is an easier process, but for others, it's harder. Once you're in that quote-unquote matrix, it's harder to break through it. But where were you positioned to start with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, given the architectural background, it would really begin with 9/11. So by the time this happened, I wasn't living in a world of illusions already for many years. There's a great American architect, Richard Gage, who's set up an organization, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and he's done a lot of work on that. So I guess I didn't have that much of the shock that maybe other people may have had, and many are resisting. That's one of the main things that keeps us separated from people who don't want to see what's happening. It's not that they don't want to, because the shock would be too big. And I feel that a lot of us, in some aspects of our lives, were almost ready to see. But some are not. And I think we do have to try and develop empathy towards those who can't, because it would be a huge, probably mental breakdown for them, and they maybe are not ready for it right now, and it may happen later on. They maybe need to become stronger. I do believe that spiritual work is very important in order to hold that truth of what's happening, of what's happened, of what it really means about the people who rule this world and how they see everyone else. It's quite big what they've done. So it's not easy. It's not easy to live with that without a strong spiritual anchoring. And I think that's what I was developing already when this happened. And then I saw people around me who lived up to it, and then it came out with them too.
So you were ready, weren't you? You were like cooked and ready to go.
I think I was ready, but I also was a little bit not maybe exactly ready for the sort of the depopulation agenda.
Right.
I mean, when Mike first started mentioning it on the Telegram channel, I was a little bit like, whoa, is this what's really happening? And I think it took me a while to come round.
Right.
And now I got to the stage, sort of looking it up. Yeah, it was on the agenda since the 60s, really, and it peaked probably in the late 60s and early 70s with the Club of Rome and all that. So now I'm kind of completely on.
It's like an onion, though, isn't it? You start to peel it, and then you realise that all of these things are all attached to each other and all associated with each other. And, there is that whole thing, isn't it? If you're going to tell a lie, make it a big one. And what we've experienced is probably one of the biggest ever in my lifetime, certainly. So, but do you feel that you've found your way through this now, or are you still working your way through the darkness?
I think it's not a sprint, it's more of a sort of long distance run. And that's how I always felt about it. So to some extent, I think it's important not to get captured by it, 24 hours a day or 12 hours a day, because I think then the other side has won, because they have your life.
Right.
I think you do need to maintain a degree of, joy, normality, appreciation of beauty, sort of compartmentalize. And then there are times and that's how I do it. There are times when I would really go and hit as hard as I can.
Yeah.
And then there are times where I just withdraw and do something totally different.
Right. I understand that. That's survival. Thank you. And Darren, probably the only person on this panel to have been demonised by Mariana Spring and Verify BBC.
What the hell are the rest of you playing at?
And Sainsbury's, apparently. So, Darren, of course, you're a musician as well as a truth teller. This has been a long journey for you, hasn't it? This didn't just happen over COVID.
No, I've been awake for 10 years, and I'm living my best life, and most of the artists and people that I'm speaking to are living their best lives. It was very different to what it was before, or we've all had massive changes, and it is how we respond to it, just the same as this festival. There was problems early on, it's how we responded to it. Everybody's here. You're all smiling, you're all having a good time. Yeah, that shows our spirit, that shows our resilience. Now, I haven't read it. Rick Rubin brought out a book all about creativity recently. I'm dying to get hold of it, but I watched a quick interview on it, because obviously this panel is about creativity. And I'm just hopefully a beacon, and so is all the other guys on the panel, for everybody else, because we're all actually creative beings. It's one of the biggest things that they hide from us. It's why they put you in jobs in factories and offices and pointless bullshit jobs. A lot of this stuff is about to be covered in the next light paper, obviously, because it's what's on my mind at the moment. But the point I'm trying to get across is when you decide what you want for tea and then cook it, that's a creative process. Yeah. If you decide, what we're going to do with the family this weekend, let's do this, blah, 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 that's a creative process. We are all creative beings, every single one of us. What the world should be like, really, is everybody being who they are, producing the best of who they are. And that's not necessarily all painters and musicians and art and poets, but that's probably part of it. But it could also be work with your hands or work with whatever it is we do. The biggest thing for me about waking up is actually having the permission from myself or whatever to be who I really wanted to be, and not giving one little fuck about what the world thinks about it.
Yeah.
And that's why I am where I am today. And that's why I can say what I can say. I'm the same person, which is beautiful, it's liberating. Yeah, I'm not have to be dishonest. Honesty is where it's at, and honesty is where art and truth come from, and creativity as well. You don't have to hide yourself, you don't have to hide your thoughts, you don't have to feel. You don't have to play up to somebody else's expectation. Just be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. And if the world likes it, or if your friend likes it, or if your mum likes it, so much the better.
Yeah.
But I can't give any more anyway. But life should be fun. It should be interesting. It's not all plain sailing. You're going to have obstacles, you've got problems, but part of the creative process is learning how to deal with those. And then when you've gone past them, think about all the problems and obstacles that you've overcome so far, you are now the person you are. Well, where are you going to be once you've gone past the next obstacles? And if you haven't got any obstacles, then you're not setting your goals high enough. Come on. What do you want to do? Start a business. Start a farm.
Absolutely.
Start a band.
You know what I say, right? And that is when people, I don't know, whoever uses social media on here, but it's always like vote Labour or vote Tory or whatever. And I always say, if that is what you're saying on social media, your ambitions are not big enough to change this world. And that, because that's the reality. We need big ambitions to change this world. And so what I'd like to drill down on now is your individual creative process. What informs you individually, and how you go about creating your art, and whether that has changed over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed for me enormously, because working for a newspaper, it's all extremely tight deadlines, and it's to a large extent collaborative, and you're negotiating with editors all the time. You're governed by whatever's in the news on a particular day, and usually you have no more than 6 hours to generate an idea and get it finished and ready to publish. And that's the way I've been used to working, and I am good at working that way. I know I can work fast under pressure. That's why I chose that career. Whereas now I've reached a point where if I want to, I can spend 3 weeks on something.
Nice.
If I have an idea, I can just let it stew for a bit and think about it. Or again, if something hits me out of the blue, I can just sit down and do it. And there's no one to tell me, oh no, actually, he's having lunch with the editor next week, so you can't do that one. So
what
that's
about
really
self?
changed.
I'm interested to know, because some of your T-shirts are incredibly powerful. Your slogans are powerful. I think many of us are absolutely aware of Bob's work. I've got the very infamous T-shirt which we've been talking about, which is of the mother and the child and the demon rising up with the jab. But there's some formidable work that Bob has produced. Do you have self-censorship, Bob? Do you ever go, oh, this might be a bit too much?
I think my last little droplets of self-censorship ended with my King Charles portrait. That was where it died.
For those who aren't aware, can you describe it for us?
Can I describe it?
Yes.
Has anybody not seen it? Okay, about 4 people. I did it. Well, I'm glad you haven't seen it because you don't look old enough. That's it. He is quite ugly. He's quite ugly, but you will. I guarantee you'll never have seen him looking as ugly as he does in my picture.
So that was one that was on the edge for you, was it?
Yeah, that was an interesting one because I was working on the piece I did for Right Said Fred called Spiritual War, which was a massive detailed piece, and I spent 3 weeks altogether. But I wanted to do something for the coronation, and I also wanted to take a break from doing that. So I thought I'll spend a couple of days and channel all of my anger and disgust about this basically satanic ritual that we're all having to watch into a mock portrait. And it's very cathartic. You know, when I do those things, it's good because I can channel all of that anger into my creative process. But doing ones like that does drain a lot of energy from you because you're really dwelling on all the horrible stuff. So I tend to do one of those, and then I'll think I'll do. For the next thing I do, I'll do something really light and positive. And
my personal favourite was the Jacinda Ardern one, because of the sort of extra little bits you added.
The extra bits, yeah. I don't expect you've seen that one either, have you? Those bits were an afterthought, actually. I'd nearly finished it, and I thought, you know what, let's just tuck them in there and do it.
It is that detail. I think it's that fantastic detail. So what about once you've put it out there, do you just kind of wipe your hands of it, or how much are you impacted by external forces and responses?
It's probably a bit more so now than when I was with the paper, because it's different, you know. Because it's all me now. I can't turn around and say, oh, that was the editor's idea, when people don't get the joke, you know. So it's all me. It's entirely who I am and what I think and what I want to say. I don't really pay much attention to the negative stuff anymore, but all of the positive feedback really means a lot to me still, yeah.
And what you said to me earlier, which I think is really interesting, is obviously you had that experience with the Telegraph, but you are thriving above and beyond what you were at the Telegraph, right?
Yeah, they accidentally did me a massive favour by firing me. I wouldn't say I'm grateful to them, but I think their plan backfired because, and I'm an example of one of many people who've been quote unquote cancelled, who I think they hoped would just disappear, and it hasn't happened, and they're most of them are thriving and doing better than they were before, and that's absolutely just because of this movement. The people on the other side, and like the kind of people who sacked me, have no idea how big this movement is, how many people there are all over the world.
Right.
This audience is much bigger. Yeah.
And that in itself is very comforting, isn't it? Because you stop feeling so isolated. There's a time when you're going through that breakthrough moment, you can feel quite isolated.
Yeah, you do, and you feel like very powerful forces are trying to bring you down.
Right.
You know, people with a lot of influence and money want to shut you up.
Right.
But again, like Brad was saying, especially when I lost my job, the amount of messages I got from people all over the world just offering me help and support and money. Someone offered me their house. I mean, I didn't say yes to any of it, but it's just that encouragement. And every single person said, please don't stop, please keep going, because we need what you're doing.
Absolutely. So say all of us. Absolutely. Brad. Thank you, Bob. Talk us through your creative process. It's changed, hasn't it? It's changed and evolved. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's changed. So I've been 5 Times August started when I was 18, and I was writing, just breakup songs. And I've always just written about whatever it was that I was going through. And I just wanted to be a pop songwriter for a really long time. And so I would just write about relationships I was in. And eventually I grew up and I got married and I had kids. And I didn't need to write those anymore. And when all this happened, that's who I was thinking about, my wife and kids, and how do I want to use my talents to say what needs to be said that's not being said. And so my creative process through all these songs over the last couple of years has changed in the sense that I let them find me. I let these songs find me. I would relate it to instead of reaching for an apple, letting the apple fall and letting it come to you. And I really became spiritual in my creative process. I started the pandemic with a song called We Are in This Together, because that's what everybody was saying. And I wanted to do a nice song that was positive and optimistic, and we were doing 2 weeks to slow the spread. And that was really the end of an era, because I put it out and then George Floyd happened and all this other junk, and we became so divided, and I was like, well, I was an idiot. And then I shut off creatively for about 8 months, because I was like, that was my one go at like, hey, do this. And, it wasn't that I was buying into it, but I just wanted to put out something that was positive for people that were, cooped up or something. But then I prayed on it, and I said, what do you want me to say, God? And I wrote, God help us all. And so that was the first time where I really felt like I tapped into that channel of delivery.
Right.
God has the best ideas. I don't know if you know that. He's a very good creator. And so there, the album that I put out, Silent War, if you listen to it top to bottom, it was created over a year and a half. It's 12 songs in the order that I released them. So it tells a story there. And there are months between those songs. I put out God Help Us All in January, and then I put out the second song, Jesus, What Happened to Us, in April. And I had to wait for that to come instead of being like, I got to write 12 songs about COVID or whatever. I let them each come to me at a time, and I feel like that's why it's resonated so well, and that's why it feels the way it feels, because I tapped into, I said, what do you want me to say in my prayer? And that's how I found each one of these songs, I think, and that's how I continue to move forward.
So are you saying that your process changed because you then became more spiritual?
Yeah, I mean, I've become more spiritual in the last, I would say probably 5 to 10 years of my life, and but I didn't tap into it creatively.
Right.
And so this was really a sit down and a chat with God to say, you gave me all this talent to do something with it, and I felt like everything I had ever done up until this point in time was to lead me to be this artist, you know? And I think that goes for everybody here, is your entire journey led you to this moment to be here, who you are at this point in time.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is that it is a process as such. But I find that, I mean, there are a number of ways that I think people are able to finally tap into that spirituality. Mm-hmm. And one of them is through just sheer desperation. I cannot function like this anymore in this world. They're telling me it's this way, but it's another way. And was it something like that you experienced? Because it's like a cognitive dissonance, isn't it? We're raised to believe something. Well, I wasn't. I was raised in a hippie household where everything went. But, you know, but for the most part, most people are raised in a very sort of compliant, conformist manner, and you have to break out of that first to be able to get through to the other side. And so what was that for you?
I think I had a lot of pieces in front of me by the time COVID came around, because our oldest son was hurt by his childhood vaccines, and that led my wife down the rabbit hole 10 years ago. And so all this stuff was sort of already in our ether, and there are little pieces of waking up that, you know, it's. I was just talking to somebody when we got here about it's like I think I was talking to you about it, but it's like a thread, you know. You one thing happens to your life personally. And you start waking up little by little, and you pull that thread, and the longer it gets, the faster it gets. And so, you know, I was just thinking about, like I said earlier, my kids and my family, and that sort of just how I want to use this time. And I'm also looking around going like, where's all my heroes too? You know, where's all my musical?
And I think that's something we must absolutely talk about.
We should talk
about
that.
We absolutely have to talk about that. The fact that there were so few people prepared to stand up and be counted, I think that was phenomenal. And so those who were prepared to do it naturally stood out. Naturally. And if you are of the mind where you do speak out, then you gravitate towards those people. Bob and I may not have ever talked when we were both in mainstream media newspapers, but once outside of it, and we realised we had much more in common than not. So, and that's why I'm really interested in the creative process. So, Robin, architecture and films, where do we even begin with that? Do you bring them
music.
together? And music, of course. How do you bring them all together? Do you straddle all three?
Yeah.
And has that changed?
Well, now I think I'm leaving the architecture behind a little bit. I think the problem with it is that you do tend to have to work for power structures ultimately. Those tend to be the clients. And so, given what's been going on, I felt least comfortable inhabiting that world.
Right.
And I felt it was almost like I have to put on hold everything that's happening in order to fit into that and pretend it's not happening on a daily basis. And so I naturally went towards other things. And the film you talked about was actually about this crisis in the view of the human body as a machine, which is one of the reasons why everyone believes the stories they're being told about science, is because they see their body like that. They've forgotten that a human is a holistic element that has huge power of self-healing, and they believe that some kind of object is going to fix them, whether it's an injection or a pill. And we got to this stage because of a sort of a philosophical issue that happened hundreds of years ago that then was exploited by people like Rockefeller. And so that the film was already dealing with that, and I already felt comfortable dealing with that before 2020. We were already, I guess, tuned into what was going to happen before it happened. Then I think something that's in the back of my mind, I know it's in the back of Brad's mind and Dan Aston Gregory, which are the parallels between now and the 60s.
Yes.
The similarities, but also the differences. Because I think things that were not dealt with then came back with a vengeance against us, and that's something that and on the same time, things that were propagandized then as sort of the great freedom and liberation were extremely superficial. And ultimately, they allowed the people who became the champions of that to turn against us at the first opportunity and to align themselves with what I would call the oligarchy in the name of greater good and things like that, because it hadn't really been thought through, and there was this belief that you can start from scratch. And also it was this idea of science. One of the things that I sort of said a few times, which is the problem of shifting the locus of truth from let's say religion or spirituality, let's say spirituality, because it doesn't matter which one it is, to science, is that you drop the moral codes and you think they're up for grabs.
Right.
So that was the problem of, one of the problems of culturally the 60s was, we don't need that. We don't need the codes. We'll just do spirituality in a very superficial way, but with no real reference point that we used to have as a culture. So anything goes. And then if I come up and say, oh, it's love is, like they've done, like love is getting vaccinated for other people. And, oh yeah, that is, hold on a minute. That's where did that? So we've lost a lot of things, and I think that's one thing that I've been working now for almost a couple of years, not in writing a film which deals with some of these issues, but in a way that the other side can see, right. Because I think there's two things that culture can do. One of them is what let's say we do, what I do with the channel on let's say on Twitter, or some of the songs that I've collaborated on, which is talking to us and saying, this is what's going on. And another thing is the attempt to bridge the gap. And in order to do that, I think it can happen in an indirect way, in a subconscious way, in just the energy that you transmit. And if you're too literal, you're going to lose all the other side. So in the films, I think this attempt to bridge is still there. And that's what I'm trying to do by looking at the 60s, because really I'm talking about how what's happening now.
Sure.
But I'm hiding it.
Right.
And that's the thing that I'm talking about. And it's just veiled, but the similarities are so big. But in a way, we do need to address all the problems that were created.
Yes.
By the equivalent movement then.
Yes,
as well as the positive things. So again, it's not, and that's something, some people had issues with the film, The Book of Vision, because it's ambiguous. The good guy is also not particularly ethical in certain situations. And people say, hold on, but why is it like that? Well, that's what we need to see the world in a way that we go beyond this, which is this demonization. There's, the good guy and the bad guy. And that's the same thing about the 60s. It wasn't all good. But it wasn't also all bad. We need to see what was really wrong about it and be very clear about that, right. As well as what was being promoted as. So that's my more recent work.
I feel that we stand a greater chance of getting to the truth of the matter now, because I feel that people, I hate to use the expression waking up, I can't think of a better one, but I feel people are waking up on an exponential level. I mean, my next door neighbours who were double, triple jabbed, they told me now they're not even going to jab their children. And it's practically unheard of. And I think things are changing so quickly. So, and it's because of the work of these guys and people like these guys who are each making a mark in their own creative field. And Darren, you had an incredible creative response to the absolute overwhelming nature of bad news, and that is you created your own newspaper.
Yes.
And I am obviously
we
a musician.
Created it.
Yes, absolutely. But it takes somebody to bring all that together. So talk us through that, because that was quite a phenomenal thing to do. And of course, as we've seen, you've had many people set out to demonize you. I don't know if anybody has seen the Mariana Spring clip. It's one of my personal favorites, because it's where you actually say to her, from the way you're talking, your questions, it sounds like you're going to frame me as being violent. And were you the one who?
He's the one that asked the
well
question.
done, great stuff. And she's like, oh no, I've been asking you lots of questions. It's going to be a very bad. And then the next thing you see is the BBC headline about the light being about violence. So it was absolutely brilliant. That's fantastic to catch somebody like that. So tell us about that. A very creative response to misinformation.
Yeah, we really should hire Mariana for the marketing department.
Yeah.
And it's this thing about letting it come to you. You know what I mean? Rather than fighting and all that. It's the same as. Now, she was really insistent. Any contact she could find for me, we all got 5 or 6 emails. She did the lot. And at first it was like, no, go away. And then I thought about it. Obviously, they're going to do the hit piece anyway. So can we sit in a room with her and make her look, make it obvious who's the normal one and who's the crazy one? And by people's response, we did achieve that. It's done a huge amount for the paper. It's the same story for all of us. Or every time, the more they push back, the more they say these guys are terrible, and people look and they go, well, number one, they're telling the truth, and number two, they're obviously just normal people. They're not walking around with Nazi outfits on, or jackboots or any of that nonsense. So, look. Honesty and truth is part of the creative process as well. The start of the light paper, obviously I had no publisher experience whatsoever. But the Sovereign Independent, which somebody showed me another copy of this morning, was one of the main, that was from Ireland. So somebody was doing a truth paper back in Ireland back in 2010, 2011, ages ago. And that was definitely one of the inspirations for it. It relates back to everything that we need to do now. It was a tall mountain. It seemed like an impossible task. Never knew it, but I knew we had to get one out and just do it and say, look, we said we're going to do something. Now we've done it. And to be honest with you, we're coming up to our 3rd year anniversary next month in September. 3 years. 3 years as a great big saw on the backside of the banking beast that aims to control us. And they do it by, don't forget, they do it by controlling our minds. There's no jackboots going on. I mean, they will one day if they want to. If they win, there will be drones and all the rest of it. Yeah, if we let it get there. It's a race against time. People are waking up. Our job, all of our jobs, is to help that situation in any and every single way we can.
Everybody can play a part.
Everybody
Each
does.
one teach one.
And where do you want to be? I don't want it to sound just a general motivational thing, but waking up for me wasn't just about, wow, the world is, because lots of people focus on that. Again, you mentioned it, Robin, spending all this time focusing, oh God, they're doing this, that. I mean, if you done your study and all the rest of it, we know what's going on. You know what I mean? The light paper really isn't. I mean, hopefully we'll make it interesting for everybody. But the light paper isn't really for the people that are already awake, obviously. It's for somebody who's obviously curious, but obviously has a thinking mind. It has lots of range of interesting topics. We need to draw people in. Yes. Yeah. We need to. I love spending my time doing that. The Cash is Freedom campaign with the £20 notes that we put out. Another great. It's a creative process. Now it doesn't. Anybody can do that. Everybody's got the license to do that. There's no rule or law. Whatever you're doing right now. But if you're not that way, that's fine. Help other people do that, or do things in your way. There's so much to do. It's like. You heard about the Wild West, or not necessarily the Wild West, but obviously the frontier, pushing the frontier, and they just got the conquered America. It's almost like that all over again. Yeah, now we have to survive, and we need the big infrastructure, which, you know what I mean, we don't have that quite. But on the ground level, on the human social level, on the entertainment level, on the media level, on the food supply level, on lots and lots more levels, the more we get involved, the more people do more stuff. We'll end up, everybody will be in this tent, and there'll be nobody on the other side.
Right.
There'll be nobody to sell the CBDC to, because everybody will know that it's a control mechanism and not bloody money. So,
yeah, basically.
As you can see, I enjoy my life so much more now, having honest work. Being able to push myself and create new things and try new things out. And I just want to be that inspiration that everybody else goes, I could do that too. If that wanker from Manchester can do it, I can do it too. I've just been doing it a while, that's all.
Bob, you should put that on a T-shirt. That wanker from Manchester.
Oh God, there's a quote from Mariana.
So I think what I'd like to talk about now is what we've alluded to, and that is me personally, when over this last period, So I was a music journalist before I was an investigative journalist, and my forte was hip hop. And so during the COVID period, I was so distressed that the cutting edge rappers, people who had been so radical when I was coming up, were not saying anything. It was a shock to me, a real shock. And then you see things like Snoop Dogg advertising Just Eat and telling people to mask up and stay in home. So I was really, really incredibly disappointed by musicians. So what I'd like to find out from the panel is even if it's individuals or a particular sphere, who were you felt that should have been talking out and were failing to?
Yeah, it was a real shock for me, the lack of response from most people, especially creative people. And I think I often say, at the beginning of this, I never expected to stand out in any way. I didn't think, I'm going to be deliberately contrarian and get a big following for going against this. I really assumed it was as if this thing has come along, and anyone who was creative, anyone who was vaguely anti-establishment, would take the view of, this is our moment. Exactly what Darren was just saying about everything that's happened on your journey. It was for now. It was so you could be here now to fight this. And I couldn't understand why these creative artists and musicians who had always gone against the grain and pushed back didn't have that kind of moment of, fantastic, this makes sense. And I did feel that. I thought, now this weird niche thing that I've always done since I was a child suddenly makes sense. It was so I could be here to fight this nonsense, And I couldn't understand why so many didn't. I mean, I think, bands like, for me, the biggest joke was Rage Against the Machine. Oh, it was just, again, everything.
I mean,
almost all of their songs appear to be about more or less this movement and this sentiment, and it's comply with the machine all of a sudden.
There were so many disappointing people for me. I mean, the endlessly disappointing people. And Brad even has gone so far as to target these people. Well, target's probably not the right word, but tag these people.
I think it is right to call them out and shame them. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. What about in your profession, though, Bob? Because who else was doing what you were doing? Nobody. And so you were very much out there on your own.
The only other people really sort of weren't mainstream to begin with. And they've also gained big followings, but no. I mean, I used to be great friends with all the other cartoonists. We'd meet up a couple of times a year in London, and we'd go for drinks and bitch about editors, basically. Because people move around, we all knew the same people, and it was great. They used to mock me for being they used to say, "What's it like being paid to produce Tory propaganda for a living?" And before things got really bad in 2020, I kind of said to a few of them, sort of, "Haha, who's doing that now?" It was Guardian cartoonists were really pushing the whole narrative all the time.
Of course.
I actually appeared in a Guardian cartoon. One of my former friends. He was kind of my mentor, Martin Rowson, the Guardian cartoonist. He helped me to get into the industry and get my first work and everything. And one day I looked and he's put me in a cart. He did this kind of pyramid of nutcases, sort of layers of idiots who were opposing everything. And I was sort of on about the third row down, and the side, this sort of protruding nose.
What an honour.
Glasses.
What an honour.
And, yeah.
How do you feel now when you have, the Telegraph suddenly telling us about what has gone on? How do you feel, given that you were on the sharp end of them?
Yeah, slightly vexed. Yeah.
Vexed as opposed to vaxxed.
But I'm pro-vex.
Yes.
Very much.
Pro-vexed.
I knew it would happen, though, and I actually said it to them when they sacked me in the hearing. Because it ended with the guy actually asked me, how much do you really want to keep this job? And I said, well, after this, not very much.
Nice.
But I said, I will just say that the argument I've made here and what you're firing me for, I guarantee in a year from now, a couple of years from now, it will all be all over your newspaper. You'll be pointing this stuff out. I've said it now, and because the narrative isn't ready yet, because you're not supposed to be talking about it yet, you fired me. But I'm I'm not going to let you get away with that. You know, I will keep reminding people.
Right.
This is the problem. Everything now, because of the world they built, because of the internet and the social media they created to do all this, everything's on record. You know, everything they've said, everything we've said. So I do think it's important. It's not about revenge so much.
No.
You know, I don't need to get revenge on them. It's about they're trying to twist the narrative, and they want people to forget what's happened or misremember, and they're trying to give this impression of, you know, well, it turns out lockdowns harmed half of children.
Right,
you know.
exactly.
But the government themselves
let's head
told
us
us
into
that.
another one.
You know, we already knew that at the time. The Telegraph published that at the time, and
Right.
it's one of those things that should have ended it. But everyone just shrugged and carried on and had another lockdown.
So what do you think, as a newspaper man, for want of a better description,
Yeah.
do you feel that they were all involved in one big consensual lie, or what?
I think there was a period, probably the first 8 or 9 months, where there was a bit of agency, and editors did appear to be thinking for themselves. They had their own views. The editor used to send me emails sometimes saying, I agree with what you just wrote on Twitter, you know. And I was just thinking, put it in your bloody paper.
Right.
Then, you know.
Right.
It was really confusing, but there was definitely a turning point as we got nearer and nearer to the jabs towards the end of 2020. I know there were meetings that happened in Downing Street with all the editors from Fleet Street, where I think they were told, okay, it's time for you to change tack. You've got to get on board now. We're doing a second lockdown. And the problem is, as you probably know, Sonia, for years newspapers have been on their knees financially, and having a kind of existential crisis.
Serves them
they didn't
bloody
know.
right.
Yeah, well, but you know, I don't think it's a coincidence that they'd been got. It was exactly at that point, so they were very vulnerable. So when the government said, "We'll give you millions and millions in advertising if you fill your pages with, you know, download the NHS app." You can keep going, and you don't need to worry about losing your readership so much.
Yeah.
But you just have to push the lockdowns and the jabs.
Right.
I mean, I was told, they were quite explicit. They said, we want our readers to forget about lockdowns now and celebrate Boris Johnson for the miracle jabs.
So did they want you to do
and everyone was still locked
illustrations
down at this point. We were
this-
still, you know.
Did they want you to do illustrations to like celebrate Boris
they
Johnson?
Did, yes,
Ooh.
they did. Yeah, I got every day they were saying, "Can you do something pushing the injections? You know, a positive one." And I said, "Look, if you want, I won't do anything against it, but I'd rather say nothing." You know, I was lucky because I went off on paternity leave in January 21. So,
Right.
and then I actually only worked a few weeks before they sacked me when I went back. But yeah, they definitely wanted me to do that because as soon as I went off on leave, all the cartoons would hooray for the jab.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I just think it's unconscionable that they want to sort of memory hold this idea now that they, you know, it was wrong what took place. Yeah, but you were pushing it. You know?
They all did, absolutely. Because I don't know. There's this idea journalists have to be balanced, and obviously a lot of the time that's true. You know, you need to. But in terms of the ethics of this, the morality, and actually the legality, there weren't two sides. There was only one side.
Yep.
Once you've established that lockdowns are going to kill hundreds of thousands of people, that's it. If you're a journalist with integrity or a newspaper, who's like the Telegraph is supposed to be the newspaper of of the church and things, and ethics. You just oppose it every day. You say this needs to end, and they didn't do that.
That is part of the problem, isn't it? With the established media, is that there are still people who believe if it appears in the Daily Mail or the Telegraph, it must be right. And so that's what we've been having to overcome as well. So thank you, Bob. So Brad, you approached it, as I say, in a very interesting way. I've seen you go after Pink and John Legend and all these people who are making an absolute fortune from pushing an experimental jab. Talk to us about your plan of action.
Well, it's just being tired of it continuing. I mean, when one of the reasons I started speaking out was and why those first couple songs are very Dylan-esque was because Dylan didn't show up. So I was like, I'll put on my Dylan shoes and do it. And which is also sort of a nod to say, hey, you're not here, you know. but the longer it goes, and to arrive at 2023 and see artists like that still collecting a check,
Right.
Pink, John Legend, Questlove, Martha Stewart, they've collected a check off of the backs of those who have been injured,
Right.
and to continue to smile at the camera and say, hey, you should do this. It's very sinister and evil to do that. And so I get in a lot of trouble on Twitter, just because that's the place to do it, because that's where you're going to reach people that might not hear that message otherwise.
Although,
I think,
of course, it's now called X.
I'm not calling it X. It's still yes.
X,
Yeah.
the everything app.
Yeah, Twixer, or whatever. But that's how I use my platform. I mean, I don't really have a reason to be on social media other than just to fight back, and that's how I choose
Right.
to use it. I mean, I used to use my platform, like to share pictures of my kids and stuff, and then I realized I don't need to put that out there, I don't need to share that with anybody. I'd rather just, So that's why a lot of my friends thought I went nuts, because I wasn't telling you that I wasn't showing pictures of what I was eating anymore.
Right.
It's like,
So
you're talking
it was
all
a
about
big
Fauci.
culture change for a lot of people, what you went through. They'd gone from knowing Brad one way, writing love songs, and suddenly you were talking about Anthony Fauci and being a
Yeah.
sad little man and experimental. That's a big culture shock for your audience.
Yeah, it is. So in that first song, I thought I was being careful, God help us all, and I wrote the line, vax up, mask up, get your body trashed up. You know it better than I do. Thank you. But when I wrote that, I was like, I haven't written this before, and I'm going to upset some people. This is me actually telling you exactly how I feel. And that was sort of a shock for anybody who heard me singing I Love You for 20 years, So,
Right.
It's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be this love song guy. But I didn't ever expect to wear protest shoes, I didn't expect to be a protest artist. Much I don't think, like you said, I didn't expect to be in this realm, but it was sort of like you can see all the pieces leading up to this moment, and that's how I got there. But yeah, calling out the artist, I think I've been anticipating since, I don't know, early 2020, there's going to be a pivot here where artists it's going to be cool to speak out against the man again, and they're all going to be like, oh yeah, I was a part of it the whole time. And that's why I continue to do that,
Right.
to remind, Pink and John Legend and whoever it was, like, no, you weren't, and you don't get to come back to this side,
Right.
especially at this point. It's over,
Right. I think a theme that is very much developing here is this whole idea that it's not so much a career that you're all having, but a calling. It's that whole kind of, it is a spiritual calling where your life makes sense, that you've arrived at this moment. But as you say, you showed up because Dylan didn't. And that is the whole point, is your very presence, every one of you in the fields that you work in, stand as a reminder of all the other people who are still sitting down. So you don't even hardly have to say anything. You just have to be visual now and carry on doing what you're doing. So what have been the responses? Has there anybody responded like a Pink or a John Legend or any of those?
Not really. Pink blocked me,
Oh.
and
Well, there's a response.
Pink blocked me. Questlove blocked me. I don't know if it's probably not them, but I was going after a bunch of people. I wrote Peter Frampton, and I was like, hey, you said this. Do you still feel this way? And he was like, yes, I do. And I was I'm giving you an out here. Just say no, I mean, I think we got who we got. I was, to hear Clapton and Van Morrison be the guys to say, to hear those songs that they put out, it was such a okay, thank you. It was so relieving to feel that, okay, you guys got it. Thank you for saying something. But everybody else, literally everybody else, I'm like, where's everybody else? So that's why, I continue to call them out on Twitter, and really most of them just ignore it, and that's the way it is.
More power to your elbow, though. Absolutely more power to your elbow. I want to get responses from Robin and Darren, and then I would invite anybody if you have any questions that you'd like to perhaps ask the panel. So, Robin, in film, I mean, where do you even start? Was anybody else, standing up and being counted?
Well, what's interesting now is also what's happening to the response of The Sound of Freedom.
Right.
That sort of tells you a lot about the film world. I think in the arts in general, I mean, I think it's, because we had this conversation at the Better Way conference. My talk was really about how culture can potentially bridge that gap. Right. It can fight, but it can also potentially bridge. And then, went for a chat with Neil Oliver, and he was saying, well, my problem with that argument is that, what you're saying now, people didn't show up. But we did.
Right.
And there's different ways of showing up, too. In terms of, like, Dylan, the artwork in his latest album is very explicit. And in a way, if he had said anything more, he'd be in the sort of cancel group. So he's still letting out an image which is clearly about, a skeleton with a vaccine and all that. So he's still putting that out. But he's allowing it to doing it so that it can get to without sort of below the radar, which is one way of working. Approach. Which is one way of working. It's better than nothing. I don't think he did nothing. He did something.
Right.
Then there is the approach which is very direct, and I think that there's I kind of do both in different fields. In film, the thing is if you just do certain films, they will not get distribution in the current setup. And that's what needs to be revolutionized in film. It's the distribution side. And with The Sound of Freedom, Angel Studios has managed to do that, although with very big oligarchic financial backing as well.
It comes with its own controversy, doesn't it?
It comes with its own, but I think that's a model that should be created here too, because that's where the gatekeeping is the distribution.
Right.
So if that can be changed, everything else has changed. So that's one of the things that needs to go. So you need people who really want to do that, and unfortunately, they do need to have contacts with people with money in order to do certain of these films. But unfortunately, in the arts, there is the huge influence of The Guardian.
The Guardian newspaper.
Yeah. And that's I really blame, in a one-liner, I blame The Guardian for people not speaking. All it would take, and to be honest, it's so powerful in people in the arts in general. All it would take is maybe 2-3 days that they change the narrative, and everyone would be up in arms like we are.
No.
But they're never going to do that.
No.
So, and people still read and still think, oh, it's better than the other ones because it's got a lot of arts in it and all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's culture and all that. But it's not. It's sort of, it's control.
Yeah, it's still establishment media. It's still, and actually I find newspapers like The Guardian almost more dangerous than a Telegraph or a Daily Mail, because you know what to expect with a Daily Mail and a Telegraph, whereas The Guardian, they lull people into this false sense of security that they're on the side of the people. And so I find that quite dangerous in itself. But were people blocking you from at all? Because it sounds like did you seek to find a middle road? I mean, what you had to say about Dylan, I can assure you, although you might not have seen it, both Bob and Brad, they're not impressed with Dylan, clearly. Right. But it just depends. I mean, so that's a no compromise, absolutely no compromise. But it sounds like you're seeking to find a middle way.
I personally am very direct on Twitter, which I know where the other sides can see things and things like that, and I don't play that ambiguous game. I'm very, very direct. But I think in certain forms of art, the power of the subconscious to get below the radar and to change the mind of someone over time is the only thing that can do it, given the polarization that we've got. I think the fighting direct, one side against the other, it's a stalemate. Yeah. It's not going to move very much. I know you're very optimistic. It's moved already.
Oh,
of course, well, you said that people are waking up, but it's moved already a lot since 2020. But I think where we're at, the movement, it's quite slow because of the gatekeepers, because of the media
huge.
And the Guardian.
We've got so many years to unpack. That's the thing. It's a huge task, and I'm really glad that actually this panel is pretty much representative of all different forms of art, because I think that's really important. But each one of us, I was a contributing consulting editor at ITN for 8 years, but because of speaking out through COVID, they were like, we can't have this. So I was quite happy to step. And the thing is, the same way with Bob is like you either sink or swim. And I find that it's these moments in time where most people actually swim, right? Because they've been waiting for that anyway. If you're already an outside thinker, you're waiting for that moment when the conventionality of your industry kind of catches up and goes, you've gone too far,
Well, I mean, the key ingredient, I think that people here have this festival, but a lot of people don't, is courage. And I get messages of, people send me information, people who are on the BBC, people who are, who faces, very well-known faces, but they don't say anything publicly.
I hate these people, for the record.
There's a whole category of people who know what's going on, but are keeping quiet because they're looking after the financial interests.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of them. And they send me things because they feel they're participating. So maybe I'll put it on a channel. So they kind of do it that way around, but they're not able to do more. They're not able with their own, let's say, lack of courage. They're not able to do more because they lack courage fundamentally.
Right.
And they don't want to pay the price.
Different priorities as well, though. Some of these people, they want that extra wing on their house, right? So it just depends what your priorities are as well. And so, but you haven't really experienced any where you've looked around and gone, my industry is absolutely failing, should have done more. That's not.
Yeah. All of them. Right. Architecture, film, music, you've talked about more than me. But, all of them have done that. So, it's, as I said, I blame The Guardian. Yeah. And in the US, I blame the New York Times.
Sounds great. Okay, we can get with that.
And the New Yorker.
Okay. Fine. Do you want to go through the whole list of newspapers?
But, Rolling Stone.
I mean, they're all the same because, I think also what Bob and I were talking about earlier was, I think it was with you, Bob, where it's been so easy for them to go from one narrative to another. And they basically, all the things that they told us about COVID in March 2020, they're now telling us about climate change now. And it's the same language, isn't it? Other than protect your granny. Well, actually, I think they are saying protect your granny, aren't they? But it is basically the same narrative. So let me come on to Darren now. So Darren, as well, musician and a publisher and a journalist. And, what can I say about our industries? I mean, nobody's doing, other than, you talked about the sovereign independent, but really nobody else is doing what the light is doing.
Great for us.
It's great for you.
Yeah, I was thinking about the dynamic Robin was talking about. With the light, and hopefully this should be relevant to everybody. In other words, how far do we go with our art? Do we, what have you? With my art, with my music, I'm uncompromising. I'll say what I think. Obviously, stick your new world all up your arse. I think that's pretty obvious to everybody. That's true. It's. But with the light paper, here's the difference, and there's a distinction because of what it's for and what have you. With the light paper, I obviously don't do that, and I get told off by distributors sometimes for even mentioning vaccines on the front. So have it in the middle, have all the, but let me, get it so, and fine, you know what I mean. We do want to draw people in. We don't want to scare them off. The light paper is for, like I've said before, people that aren't yet awake, might be curious, might be questioning, what have you, and we don't want to say, you've just done a terrible thing and you're going to die. what we want to say is life can be so much better. You're right. This is shit. And here's why, and all the rest of it. So he wants to be, and like I say, so there's that fine line for me. How far do you go? I'm sorry, but I'm with these guys on Dylan and any other certainly musical artist. But again, we had a piece in the paper about the guy that lived next door to one of Pink Floyd. It's like, why aren't rock stars doing the job, which has been a theme of this talk today. And there was a guy who wrote a letter saying, what job was that exactly? They were always there to toe the line, to pretend to be rebels and to pretend to be it's the token, we're against the establishment, and the establishment throw them out themselves sometimes and put them down and go, hey, But the real thing is from just the real normal people that don't have a stake. We've got nothing to lose, as it were, and we just get to be free and create. And look, it's all about waking up. Whether I'm doing the light paper or designing a campaign or writing a song or whatever it is I'm doing, it's generally about waking people up and inspiring people and motivating them and sharing, what spirit I've got. Because that's what makes a better world. It's the little things done daily quite a lot.
Yes, it does indeed. I like that. I like that a lot.
I don't laugh for how long. What was the question again?
About the disappointment that perhaps you felt about other people in your arena not speaking up and how that then impacted you.
I've stolen all, and I will continue to steal all of their music. So the 60s, we know about weird scenes inside the canyon and obviously Mark Devlin stuff. It's all cultural propaganda. The 60s hippie scene, all that music was there to stop people protesting against the Vietnam War and all the rest of it. It's pacified people. Probably the same in the 90s with the dance music. They'll probably do the same again. So partially the same again, what have you. But again, just taking the positive out of it, I'm stealing all of those tunes that I used to love and stealing all the best bits and recycling, which is what you're supposed to do as an artist anyway. Great artists steal from others outright, right? So again, yes, I know it's cultural appropriation. I'm going to reappropriate it and use it for truth and freedom songs and all the rest of it. And that's just, that's just part of my creative process, I suppose.
And it's a good creative process because, the thing about telling the truth is you actually can live with yourself. You can stare at yourself in the mirror and not have an issue with that. And I think that's a massive payback in its own right, really, isn't it? Would anybody like to ask? Come forward, young man.
It's a kind of observation at first. Something that was going through my mind as I was listening to you. Robin, you mentioned the veil that you have to put the truth behind because it's too much for people to take. Something that came to me really was parables. Orson Welles said the greatest story ever written was the parable of the prodigal son. And also I can see in a sense that you are the prophets for today. And I feel more people should be calling out the church. The churches have failed. The very time the churches were needed, they were closed, which is an absolute scandal. Absolute scandal. More of us should be calling out the churches and the church hierarchy and the Pope, who is absolutely complicit in this. It's heartbreaking for me. The other thing, Bob Dylan. I think none of us own the message. If we get the spirit and we are given a message, we don't own the message. I was listening to Long Train Coming during the COVID pandemic, and it bowled me over. It was absolutely, when you're going to wake up, he sings, all these stories. But who's to say they're given the message at a time of God's choosing and not ours?
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi guys, this is the second panel that's been on this weekend. We had a panel yesterday. Joseph Arthur was on that. We had Sean Ward, is Sean in the house. There's quite a few people on that. And the question came up about forgiveness. Yeah, so I asked kind of like a direct question. Can there be forgiveness without justice? And it's something that I feel has divided the freedom community a little bit. I'm getting a bit of feedback from this mic, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of course. There's some people that are uncompromising. You know, someone we know, Abby Roberts. I know you know Abby. Well, Bob, she's completely uncompromising. She's calling out people, or she has called out people like Asim Malhotra and maybe even Andrew Bridgen. Now, these people are coming on board and doing good stuff as well now. So it's really difficult. I find myself torn in, do we forgive these people? Do we hold them accountable? Because we've all made sacrifices. These are high profile people, but I'm sure everybody in this room in some form of or another has had to sacrifice something or has been wronged by somebody. And I know I wake up in the middle of the night and I still feel that anger inside, you know, to people that had wronged me. You know, I've lost a career out of this, and I know people have lost their jobs and things like that. So basically the question is, you know, can there be forgiveness? But do we need to hold these people accountable as well?
Good question. Excellent question. I would just like to answer that straight away, if I may, me personally. And that is, I think it's really simple. And that is, if somebody is genuinely, apologetic about their previous, genuinely, you know the difference between sincerity and somebody who's just doing it because it's going to get them to the next level. But I think for me personally, there has to be room for forgiveness, because this is the army we need to build. We need to bring them over to our side, because at this moment in time, it's our tax money that creates the army against us. So we need as many people on our side as possible. So regarding the two people that you've just mentioned, obviously there are going to be individual issues as well that you have to question, and certainly an MP. My issue is mostly with doctors, because if I, as somebody who knew sod all really about medicine, knew there was a problem with an experimental jab, then why didn't doctors? So those are really the ones that I'm struggling with.
I can't better that. Anything else?
Forgiveness.
Yeah.
Oh, Bob, you're uncompromised.
Well, I get into trouble a lot about this. People always ask me why you mean to Asim Malhotra and things like this. And I mean, I think forgiveness is quite a complicated concept. People have slightly different ideas about what it means. I agree with you, Sonia, in that I take this like a biblical approach, in that, you know, it can only come after someone has actually said sorry for what they've done. That's the first thing, okay? If none of these people have actually apologized, then that's not an issue. I mean, the other thing is that I think, by and large, we forgive people not for them, but for ourselves. Right. Forgiveness is really about letting go of your anger for what somebody has done. That doesn't mean that the person doesn't still deserve to face some consequences for what they've done, right?
Especially if they've been on TV pushing an experimental jab.
If somebody's convicted of murder, you know, murdering a child, for example, the mother might choose to forgive that person. They still go to prison.
Right.
You know, it doesn't work like that. But the problem I have with certain characters is what I've seen happening is somebody comes forward, and maybe they do apologize, and maybe they acknowledge what they've done. They say, we've made the biggest mistake anyone could ever make, and as a result, hundreds of thousands of people are dead. And then what people on our side do is basically go, great, take the wheel, lead us out of this. You're clearly the person, and they're not the people. This is what worries me, you know.
Bob, hold on a sec, just 2 secs, Bob. Let me just continue that just a second.
Yeah.
So that worries you. Why does it worry you? Do you feel they're trying to take us into a cul-de-sac?
Well, I don't think because it's a hell of a mistake to have made, isn't it? Especially if you're a doctor, right? Ooh. And whether you forgive them or not, it says a lot about the kind of people that they are. And I just don't think... We have enough... You know, Robin is very close with Mike Eden. That is a good man. That is a man we can trust. It's a man with integrity. Another one is Professor Bhakti, Sukrit Bhakti. We've got the kind of people that we need. You know, I numbers are important for the movement as a whole, but in terms of the people we look to for solutions and to guide us, we've already got some of the best people ever.
I agree.
You know, we don't need somebody like
Some of the best critical thinkers around are in this movement. Absolutely, 100%. Right. So, but can you personally forgive, Bob? Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
I haven't had many apologies yet.
Right.
So I don't know. I'll let you know when they come.
Fair point. Brad?
What was I going to say? I think that with doctors in particular, I've become friends with quite a bit of them over the last couple of years, and a lot of them are having to reverse engineer everything they've ever learned, and so it's a long process. And my friend Dr. Ryan Cole says meet people where they are, and I think that works with doctors to a degree. It depends which one. My issue, I think, on the issue of forgiveness is, you know, there's different layers to what has happened. Our personal lives, you know, it's easier to forgive your friends and family if you actually sit down and talk and those words are said, I'm sorry. And then you can work through that. But you have layers that go from the common person that was duped, that's coming to terms with that. Then you have a layer of media in there. And those people, that's where it really starts to get muddy, because it's like guys like Piers Morgan, who all of a sudden one day, you know, he's walking back on everything he said. And I that was where I, you know, went on Twitter and I said, hey, Piers, you know, here's a secret. If you want to be blocked by Piers Morgan on Twitter, ask him to apologize for all the crap he said, you know, 2 years ago, because he'll do it. And, you know, and then you're out, you know, to me. To me, it's about actions and what you're going to do, you know. You might not even say the words I'm sorry, because it is so hard to reach that point. But you can take action and you can start doing things to rectify what you've done, what you've taken part in. And I think that's a really important signal to people. If you're just trying to walk back and then no action is taken, you're trying to save face, then there's no forgiveness to be had there, because you're doing nothing to you know.
How can you? And also I mean, I think what we've also realised is that the COVID period was an absolute failure of journalism. I mean, an absolute failure. And so when you have people like Piers Morgan and Jeremy Vine and whomever pushing that narrative, how can you trust them about anything else? And I think that's part of the problem. Journalists are supposed to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And if they're not, then where do we go with that? I can't personally forgive any of them, even if Piers Morgan fell down on his knees and begged me personally for forgiveness. I'd tell him to go and do one. Because... and it's really simple why. Because if he leapt on COVID the way he did, he'll leap on the next thing that is designed to enslave us. So I can't personally afford to forgive these people. And so, and also I think that they've completely betrayed what journalism is anyway. So we now know, don't we, that journalism is churnalism, and these people are not reporters, they're repeaters. That's what we know about them. And I think that's been really... So no, there's no forgiveness there for me, I'm afraid.
No,
and because... Where is Sean Ward? Sean Ward, are you still here? Sean Ward is my co-host on Rise, and Sean is a perfect example of somebody who had to become a researcher over the last 3 years. People who were doing something else completely different were forced to do the job that the media failed to do. So a lot of people in this room have become fantastic researchers simply because you were denied the true information, and your solar plexus knows when you're being lied to. You knew when you were being lied to, and so you went on your own search. So I would like to ask, by a show of hands, who here, out of those people we've kind of talked about, how much should we forgive people who are absolutely contrite? I made a mistake. I want to move forward now in this truth. By a show of hands, who would forgive these people? Interesting. So what? Probably half. And actually, that is a perfect example. Dr. Hilary Jones was there day in, day out, telling people to do the most horrendous things with their body, and yet being pictured in a pharmacy without a mask, right? Absolute hypocrisy of these people. So, Bob.
So, can I just say one thing on forgiveness?
Yes.
I have a slightly different take on it,
Okay.
because I am a follower of Jesus Christ,
Okay.
who forgave those who killed him and those who hated him even 2,000 years later, such as the measure of the man. So I forgive all these people. I forgive people who are about to wrong me, who are going to wrong me next day, and all the rest of it.
Wow.
Do I trust them? Do I fuck?
Fair enough. Fair enough. I should say that there is a side to me where I'm absolutely aware I should be at Darren's point of forgiving these people. But at this moment in time, I still want to string them up by their knackers.
But I suppose one of the issues is if we had anything like a functioning justice system,
Right.
we could forgive them and they'd still go to prison and it would,
Right.
everyone would be happy.
Right.
But the trouble is they're probably not, are they?
Right.
And I'm sort of partway between the two camps, I guess. I know I ought to be able to forgive all these people, but I don't know if I have it in me necessarily. And I know we have like the example of Christ as something to aspire to. I'm not sure I can ever get there, though. You know, he was a fairly good guy, and I'm not pretending to be on his level. Yeah.
Any more questions?
right.
Oops, come.
Yeah, some good ideas too.
You next, Philippe.
Yeah, related to your question, actually, I had one about the expression of anger in the creative process. I mean, we all know anger is a useful energy, but it's also quite a dark energy. And as Brother Joseph Arthur over there was talking about the dangers of even righteous anger, even that could be the worst one, because you feel justified in being angry, but it's quite dark. So I just wondered about your opinion about that.
The power of anger, Bob.
I think I had the same conversation with Joseph the other night. I'm not sure. I think we were both maybe stoned, but I'm not feeling particularly angry with anything at the time. So I don't know. Maybe that's the solution.
Nice.
No, don't listen to that bit, children. I've been very, very angry for a lot of the last 3 years, and a lot of that anger, as I say, I channel into my creative energy. And something I've found hard is where to direct that anger, because obviously sometimes I'm targeting the people in authority who are doing this, but it got to a certain point where actually I felt very angry with some of our friends and neighbours and family members who were complying. And I thought, because the thing is, we were being attacked by them.
Yes.
Okay, we didn't start this. They were the ones who began to ostracize us, persecute us, call us mad. I thought people are having a hard time, so maybe I should target them and push back against those people, and I guess at the very least hold up a mirror and say, look at yourselves, it's ridiculous, and hope that they might see that they looked a bit stupid. But you can't stay angry for too long, and the thing is, anger is not actually long term. It's not conducive to creativity. It does kill it eventually.
Yeah.
Because it drains your energy.
And that's it. That's exactly it, isn't it? It's that whole thing of like loathing something so much that it just takes over you. And that in itself is not creative. It's the antithesis of creation, because you've allowed something really malign to creep in and take over you.
It's complicated because one of the points I wanted to make was creativity is one of their number one targets, the people who are running this agenda.
Yes.
They absolutely want to kill it. And I think the reason is that we are creative beings, and it's everything about what they want to do, what they want to create is a race of people, not really humans anymore, but who think absolutely, have such a low opinion of themselves. They want people to feel small, insignificant, and totally disempowered with no agency. Creativity is one of our greatest powers, and it's the thing that really sets us apart as life forms on this earth, and possibly sets us apart in life anywhere, if there is life elsewhere. I don't want to get into flat earth and things, but if there are other planets, I don't expect they've got Sistine Chapel ceilings there.
Right.
And the thing is that, it's our most creative energy, and they want to destroy it. They don't have it, these people. They aren't creative because they don't have love. You can't be creative without love, but they absolutely understand its power.
And that's why everything is so formulaic, especially in music. When the X Factor came along, for example, it destroyed the creativity in the music industry. And I saw that close up. It's like you win the competition, you get your Christmas #1. There is born a musician.
Yeah, and another X.
Yes,
funny that, isn't
another
it?
X,
the
a funny
X symbol.
that. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
but you are fueled to a degree by anger, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's important. I think you can. It's just like a very volatile fuel. You have to be very careful with it, and not use it for too long, I think.
Right.
Yeah, be sparing with it.
Anybody else like to tackle the topic of anger?
I was just thinking, just right before you handed me the mic, I thought, is it anger or is it heartbreak?
Ooh, good question.
Just the desire for justice. Yeah, well, because what fueled me early on in my career was, a heartbreak, somebody breaking your heart.
Disappointment.
I wasn't really angry at them. And so, I kind of still, I take that back. I am angry at Anthony Fauci. I'm angry at Bill Gates. But your heart is broken. I think all our hearts are broken in that way, and we're trying to fix that. That's why we are talking about forgiveness right now, because we have it in us to want to forgive.
Right.
We want to forgive the people that broke our hearts. Every single one of us has this story of the family member we don't talk to or the friendship that ended after decades, and we want to forgive them so bad. But we're also just a little angry at the situation, I guess. But you can't let that anger drive you the whole way through, I think, is the lesson here. Like fear. You can't let anger and fear drive you. That's what they want. That's why fear is pummeled every day, and we can't even keep up with the news anymore because it's something else to keep us in that mode. They want you angry and scared.
Right.
And so
So it's up to us to break out of that.
we have to break out of it. And that's the thing. That's the interesting thing, is when you get feedback from the other side and they think you're an angry, miserable person. But then when you get the feedback from this side, you really helped me. It's a love thing.
Right.
It's not really anger at all. You've used this anger. It's channeled into a love thing. And so I don't have much more to say than that.
It's complicated. I think in answer to the question, it's complicated, isn't it?
I just wanted to ask, following on from what Brad just said, because I get this, when people meet you in person, are they ever surprised that you're not just constantly furious?
That you're an angry young man.
Because I have that.
Yeah, they're always like, I thought you'd be different.
Yeah.
But I think if you follow me on Twitter, you see, I do post goofy things. I was rolling down a hill in Glastonbury the other day, having a good time. So,
Nice.
but you need to let people know that, you're not that, because people get an idea of who you are.
Right.
They think you are based on how they perceived your art. But you do need to put a splash of fun out there and let them know you're not cooped up in it.
Yeah, exactly. You're not a raging.
Right.
Yeah.
We did all think Bob was 70 years old before we met him.
I honestly thought that too. I did.
This is the thing, Bob. I think probably out of everybody here, you're the one who is least. Well, not necessarily. Probably that. But you're probably the one who is least like people imagine you to be, right? Yeah. The thing that most people say to me is, "Oh, you're a lot shorter than I thought you were going to be." Right.
I have the opposite.
Right.
People think I'm taller and older.
Right.
Younger. It's become a running joke, and there aren't many people who meet me and
you're defying expectations.
Don't say, I thought you were much, 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 much older, and gosh, aren't you tall? But it's the serious side, I suppose, is that I always expected to be anonymous in my job. You know, I didn't think people would know who I was. And I was actually told to try and be anonymous when I started, because I was only 25 when I started at the Telegraph, and the editors basically said, most of our readers are in their 90s. And if they know how young you are, they won't like your work. You know, they need to think you're one of them. Right. And I thought, well, that's nice. I'd like my work to be really well known, but no one to know anything about me. That'll be a nice situation. And then, obviously, when all this started and I became a bit more known about and people were following me and started to do interviews and people get curious. But I understand why people think I'm an old guy. But and for a while, I wasn't sure about trying to destroy the myth. Yes. And it wasn't until I was getting fired that my brother said to me, you've got to let people know who you are now. Yes. Because all of these assholes think they're bringing down a boomer, you know? Right. They don't understand that you're this young guy with a family. And right. So
dealing with your own issues.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so, but I think still, the whole idea of anger, I think it is incredibly complicated, isn't it? I'm sort of part fueled by anger and disgust a lot of the time. And yes. Yes, exactly. Next question, please.
Hello, beautiful people. I'd like to bring the question back to the arts and creativity, because I've got a background in the arts myself. And I've spent 28 years thinking about why didn't the artists speak up when the Nazis were coming down? Because I did a dissertation called Photography as a Political Weapon. And I looked at an artist called John Hartfield, who was doing anti-Nazi propaganda in Germany. And he had to escape to England in the end to not be killed. And his work was dated from like the early 30s. Like some of his iconic pictures are like 1933. And I remember just doing the maths and going, the war was 1940 to 1945. So I spent a lot of time pondering, why weren't there more artists? Because there's loads of artists in the 30s and the 40s, and you go through your art training, you know about all of these. How come they weren't speaking up? And it made me realise how long the whole Nazi period took to come in, right? And so when 2020 came in, I actually got to personally understand why the artists weren't speaking up. Now, we've touched on the fact there's mortgages to pay and all of that, but what about the artists that do work that's got nothing to do with being paid, got nothing to do with a job, they've got no reputation on it? And I've worked in the arts all my life, and I work with a collective called Exploding Cinema, which has been going for 30 years, and basically as a collective, so no one's being paid, you can't fire someone from the job. And also the other thing is it's open access, non-censorship. Now, I haven't had too much involvement due to my own health issues, which is why I knew the COVID-19 was a scam as well, because you go down that rabbit hole and you know it's bullshit, and you look into virus theory and all of this, germ theory. Anyway, it was a 30-year anniversary for Exploding Cinema, and I've been a collective member with them for, since the end of the 90s, so a long time. And I proposed to put in a film called Are You Ready? Tagline, Boost a Shot for Truth. I got counselled by this open access, non-censorship group because I'd put a little film in 2020, and I was asking the question, why aren't we talking about, why is suddenly no one allowed to talk? And they counselled me by just saying, we haven't got room for your film now. So I got in touch with someone sensible and said, what's going on? Found out they were nervous, they were using a venue where the people were old. It was a cinema museum in Kennington. They said, they're all old guys, they'd be scared. Have you not, and it was all to do with the vax, because it was in 2021, it must have been. Anyway, I knew they weren't going to be ready for the film because I hadn't actually made it. It hasn't been made yet. I will do, but no, I don't need funding. This is the thing. It's not always about money. So I want to just bring in the question, why are all these artists that are sort of don't have a monetary thing, going on because they haven't interacted with their art form in that way. What's going on? I think we need to look at the education, right? Why is the creativity being taken out of schools, right? My daughter's 15, so I've watched the school system in the last 15 years. I had to take her out for 3 years to home ed because it's just atrocious what's going on in the education system. And in terms of art education, what's happening to the art education? Why have people come out of art school? I went through the 90s and all my peers have turned woke as fuck. And guess what? They're all tuned in to climate change, right? Alarmism, climate alarmism. They're all tuned into this whole Marxist leftist thing. They've been brainwashed by it. And suddenly, me, humble little me, has become this nutter. I think they think I'm a nutcase, and they use the term like far right and, oh, you must be a Trump supporter. It's amazing what people will say. So the question is about creativity. The biggest threat that this fucking mechanism of control on us has on us, the biggest threat we are to them is our creativity and our ability to swim in and out. So why would they want people to be standing in their power as an artist? And very few people are. So what I would like to put out to you guys is, what does that raise for you in terms of, I'm saying it's not just money, it's not just a job, it's not just fear, it's not people secretly agreeing with you but they don't. These are people that literally didn't understand where I was coming from, and they're people with PhDs, by the way, masters, PhDs, degrees. So what has the fucking education system done to make people not have any critical thinking? And the artists who should be creative and open, I have never seen such a closed bunch. I'm embarrassed to say I'm an artist now. It's embarrassing.
Let me ask you a question. How has this impacted you on a personal level? Because So what was done to you was on a very sort of localized level that they sought to damp down your idea, right? That's what happened.
They just couldn't handle doing something that was against the narrative. They were so sold on this scary virus, they actually believed it. So what I'm saying is it's not a person, it's not whether, I don't give a damn that they didn't want to shove it. I hadn't even made it, actually. It was a...
Yeah. Can I get back?
I was just going to ask them that. Can art actually be done by, and to the panel as well, can art be done well collectively? Because that's what that leads to.
It wasn't collective art.
No, I get it. But what they're basically saying is, obviously, you have to subscribe to all these points of view, and you can't cover the opposite view or any other in your art. So that's not art anymore, is it?
No, it's
that's
not.
Just pure propaganda.
Yeah.
Now, as an artist, as somebody who wants to create creative express, I only want to creatively express. I don't want to. If there's any parameters, I'm not being real and I'm not being me, and it's not really art.
Right.
So.
Right.
You win.
Yeah.
You win if you create the art. If you create the art that you want to create, and who gives a shit what they think?
Right.
What you should give a shit is what you think.
No, I'm asking. You're saying.
I'm really asking the question is why have all these people that have dedicated their lives to making films and making art and using that part of their brain, yet somehow they cannot see that they've been completely lied to. It's kind of like the question is, why have artists who you would expect to be open-minded and helping people understand and see things from a different point of view, why is it they have been so locked in?
Well,
That's
I think
the question I'm really...
beyond the role of the artist, I think we are wired up for, you said it yourself, I think, we're wired up for narratives. We're wired up for stories. That's how we understand the world we're living in. And for me, that's the level that the real battle is taking place at. Not in the House of Parliament. You said, well, if you have to think between Labour and Tory or whatever, you haven't got it.
Not thinking.
It's not there, because that's actually driven also by by the narratives, what they can say, what they can't say. So it's about the narratives, and there's two basic competing ones. One of them is, there was something that, whatever, it was dangerous, and we ganged up as a society, and through the great effort of science, we may have made a few mistakes, maybe lockdown was not necessary, but, we tried our best, and this is what good, decent human beings do. That's one of the narratives, right? Then there's the other one. We are ruled by a bunch of psychopathic oligarchs that are intent on killing anyone they can to have all the resources in the world to themselves. So this is the battle, two competing narratives. The reason why people in the arts don't, also beyond the arts, don't want to accept the second one is because all their life they've been trying to create positive stories. And it's very negative, the second one. And so until you get to a stage that you can turn it into a positive, which I think is what this festival is trying to do, and all of these events are trying to turn it into a cultural positive, until you do that, you're only offering a negative one. Right. And that's also why I keep on saying that culture can bridge the gap. But you need to offer something positive, I think, in order for then those people to say, hold on a minute, so maybe you're not, which I share, all of us have experienced these things that people project onto us, the sort of angry, kind of, far-right, anti-Semitic, whatever, the racist, whatever they want to project, and you're always angry, always, but we are not like that. No. But if they've put us in that box because it's the only way they can understand our narrative could come from, because it cannot come from truth, from what they think. The moment actually we're able to offer something positive spaces, positive events, music, cartoons, and everything, which have some beauty, have some love in it, then it's more difficult for them to see us in the box. And they say, hold on a minute, maybe there is something to the other narrative. But now they have been swamped by the view that we are these kind of total nutters that have lost it and all of that. That for them it's easier to believe that, good, decent society has teamed up and great science. But the love affair between art and science has been going on for a long time. I mean, the 60s were some of the peaks of, and some works of film, like 2001 Space Odyssey or Solaris, they start to, in a way, call that out. They start to say, well, hold on a minute. This love affair has some problems. And we are still in it. So the arts are still in it. On the other hand, they're not very good a lot of them are not very good at understanding science. So the moment you try and reason with them, hold on a minute, if you say that, you are protected, if, I give, how does that actually work? If I get back, I protect, shouldn't it? It's already too scientific thinking. They just will refuse it. Right. So they will not, and it's the same thing with the climate thing. When you start saying, hold on a minute, but there's been this thing that happened on the planet the other year, and that could, they're telling you that 1% of extra greenhouse gas in total is dooming the planet. But we've had, a year ago, 10% extra boom from a volcano. How does that fit?
Yeah, they make a
block. There's going to be a block there because they don't like the scientific narrative because it's not so black and white, not so morally. So I think for me it's all happening at the level of that narrative. And one of the reasons why they fear artists so much is the notion of cultural hegemony. Right. If they hold that ground, if they keep that ground, they've got the power. The moment we get into it, and we're probably more creative than them overall now, the moment we get into that space, we're going to swing the tables around. So that's what they fear most. And that's why they will go at anything, and even the Sound of Freedom, they will go at anything that may come from our side remotely and try and shoot it down, because that's how they know they're going to lose the power, through the cultural hegemony and through the loss of faith in this narrative that, good people teamed up to save each other through the greater good notions. So I think it's stories. We're wired up to believe in stories. And we need to offer also a positive story of overcoming and teaming together like we were doing here, and overcoming, and offer that as a story whenever we're faced of, you sort of angry person and all of that. Right. So we need to be better at telling stories.
Okay, got you.
My question's directed to Dave. Basically, I want to know to Bob. Sorry. I'm sorry, Bob.
Dave's the 85-year-old you were expecting.
There you go. Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, okay. Basically, what support did you get from the NUJ? And did they try to sabotage your case? I know, I just asked that.
I didn't get any support from them. No, I'm not a member anyway. So no, I wasn't a member of any union actually, and I joined when I got suspended from my job. I joined the Workers of England union. I don't know if anyone's heard there, but they're really, really good, and they were very, very helpful. I mean, obviously, I still got fired. But
yeah,
they were great.
Actually, unions were also pretty atrocious, weren't they, over this last 3 years? Really atrocious. Yeah. All captured. And that's what it comes down to.
Me and my sister, we were calculating how much Kathleen's stock, for instance, would have been owed from her, how much membership money she gave to her union over the years in which she spent in her union. And we came to the fact that it was a small fortune for having absolutely zero representation, hardly any representation whatsoever. And there's trade union reps who are actually colluding with management to get rid of people. So I'm just here waiting for somebody to take their unions to court, that they haven't represented them. That for all the money which has been paid into the trade union, they haven't represented their interests.
Yeah, fair point. Absolutely fair point. I mean, I don't know about you, Bob. The reason I'm not in the NUJ is because they would just clip my wings.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to function.
No, I mean, they certainly wouldn't want me now anyway.
God, no.
No, but unions, likewise, so many charities have been such a letdown as well, yeah.
I just want to say a massive thank you for that. Wasn't that amazing, guys? Everyone, Sonia, thank you so much. I mean, just absolutely extraordinary. And this is how we're going to change the future. So I'm Philly J. Lay. I'm the host of the Natural Wellness. What's my podcast called? The Wellness Way with Philly J. Lay. I'd love you all on. But I just want to ask a question. There are people, we talked earlier about forgiveness and gratitude and everything, and I actually went to Berlin for the really big demonstration in 2020. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I got on a flight, a middle-aged woman on my own, just lost all my friends and family, didn't know what to do with my life and needed to find a tribe, so I got on a plane. Couldn't find the demo, sat there crying for 4 hours on the floor, on the street, on my own. And then I looked up and saw the paddy wagons coming. And for 2 hours, I filmed the Germans coming past, wearing masks, keeping a metre apart. But they walked in complete silence. For 2 hours, I filmed them. And I was able to experience, for the first time in my life, because my father was a World War II bomber pilot, complete forgiveness for what the Germans did, because propaganda is such a powerful thing. And then I was able to give complete gratitude that they were standing up and doing this demonstration. There were 1 million of them, and it was quite extraordinary to be part of. And so talking about forgiveness, and I have chosen actually to forgive Malhotra, and he is coming on the podcast, because for me, anybody that will get any information out. And so we need to wake those people up that are still asleep the best we can. And if they saw a doctor on TV telling them to take a jab, and then all of a sudden see him going, do you know it killed my dad, which is the ultimate price to pay, then hopefully we can wake a lot more people up. So that's my job. But every time I post somebody really kind of like a celebrity on my social media, like Russell Brand or Jamie Oliver, who are doing something, anything, to get any information out, whether it's the fact that a school dinner is shit or, that governments lie, I get loads and loads of hate from people saying they're a shill. And I'm fed up with this. I don't want to hear about shills anymore. I'm done. But thank you. Well, yeah, or controlled opposition. But, you know, anybody that gets anything out, I'll take it now. And talking of which, there is somebody who's trying to get something out who has got, he said in his speech when he announced it, I've got so many skeletons in the cupboard that if they all voted for me, I'd be president. So I want to know what you think, especially you, about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. standing as president.
You want to know what I think about Robert F. Kennedy? Shill or not? You know, I haven't met him. I've done a lot of work with Children's Health Defense, and I think that he's an interesting figure. With everybody that's come along, I kind of take what the good that they've given and celebrate the good. We were talking about Elon Musk earlier, and is he a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. With him, I just take the thing that he did, right? He gave us some sort of, at least illusion of free speech on Twitter back, and I celebrate that, but I don't have to trust him in the regards to that.
So I got taken down from Twitter last
Well,
night.
screw him!
On my first day, first post for the Wellness Day podcast got taken down.
Well, I'll have a word with him later.
Yeah.
So with Kennedy, you know, I celebrate the things that he's done in the vaccine community, and I don't know enough about him to judge otherwise. You know, there's certain, I don't agree with everything he's going to say or do, but that was also the old world too, where you could be friends or support somebody or, you know, like this about that person and not like that. So I'm not looking to make a hero out of anybody, and I'm not looking to find somebody that thinks that agrees with every single viewpoint that I have. But I will celebrate what he's done in the vaccine community, and you know, that's really as far as I'll go. I think that it would be very interesting to see Robert F. Kennedy and Trump in a race together, because you know, Trump is still doubling down on his support for or what he's done with the vaccine, and I think that Kennedy could put that conversation on the spotlight, and I would like to see that, honestly. But I've become sort of, as far as on the political landscape of things, you know, I think it's about the people at this point, and just what we're all going to do together. And we can't be looking for heroes. It's about making our own communities.
Isn't that it, Brad?
Yeah.
We don't need any more heroes, do we?
Yeah.
And I think that is part of the problem. When we hoist people up to these heights, the only way is down. And so I think that we all need to have much more of our own autonomy rather than focus on one person who can lead us. I will answer you very directly. I don't like the way that Kennedy downplays Israel's atrocities. I have a lot of problems with that. So that's my issue with him, and that's important enough for me to have an issue with him. But you know, but I take your point as well. Sometimes you have to look at things in the round. I just don't trust politicians. Yeah. The system it sucks.
It does, but wouldn't it help to have somebody in the White House? I mean, I think a lot of people, we saw Kennedy go into the White House with Trump within the first week of his presidency, and then the following week we saw Gates go in there, and Kennedy never went back. And we need somebody to stand up to stop this vaccination schedule, not just the COVID, the whole vaccination schedule.
Right.
I mean,
the
right.
worldwide.
The other problem, you know, look, the parallel with the 60s is the other problem of putting too much hopes in heroes is
right.
that's what happened then. You know, okay, John F. Kennedy, 63, and then Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy Sr., 60, I think 67 was it, in the space of a month.
Yes.
So once, imagine what that does to a movement when they sort of kill the two leaders in the space of a month, and then they kill the artists, you know, like, you know, the John Lennon, and you know, and I could say a few more that people think had accidental deaths, but so I think
Biggie and Tupac.
I think it's if we want to play it differently this time, we need to not put all our hopes in heroes as such,
right.
and we all need to keep on working, because otherwise it's going to sort of kill the whole hope. We don't have to put that hope in. We have to have hope in each other, in ourselves,
Right.
not into, in a handful of people, because they can eliminate them in the space of, a couple of months. And they will. Unfortunately, they will if they get that power.
Or demonize them. That's the thing, is the moment you also create a hero out of somebody, they're there to be demonized and taken down and with a target on their back. So I do think that we will benefit more from a collective effort personally than an individual.
Yeah, and I think on the vaccines question and government and politicians, etc., hopefully this will be a microcosm of it. It's the difference between, don't legislate vaccines, don't do this, government, don't do that. Okay, we can do that a lot. Or on an individual level, you can say, I'm not having any of those and neither have any of my children. Now, that's the power I have.
Right.
Right? And it's whether the outreach is still the outreach, the information is still, we still need to inform why I'm not doing that. But I'm not going to change their minds. There's billions and billions. It's a whole industry. It's the pharma, tech, media, blah, 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 in banking, etc. It's one great big corporation, really. And while we expose them, while we talk about how corrupt they are, obviously, in terms of my actual directed energy effort, they can mandate and legislate all they want, and they are going to. It doesn't affect my, unless if they come to my door with coppers to force inject. But then we're at war. That's the you know what I mean. Then it's time. Okay, well, then I'm fighting for my life. But they don't do things like that. They do it through mind manipulation. Through this is a great thing. You're helping your children by injecting them with this poisonous shit.
But in America, certainly with chemotherapy, if your child has cancer in America and you choose that you don't want chemotherapy, they can take your child into care. And is that going to happen with the jabs for even the child?
Children are taken off of their parents in the UK for much less. I've done case books where a couple, the woman was deaf and the husband had actually mild learning difficulties, and they took 3 of their children away because it's a business. And so they are taken away for much less, sadly. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous.
I think that's my thing about, if we had somebody, not that we should rely on one person and put anybody on a pedestal, but my God, it would be good to have somebody writing executive orders and ripping up this.
Understood. Understood. That would be fantastic.
Can't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely.
But a lot of people put that hope in Trump, who ran a great campaign. He ran an amazing campaign, said all the right things. The moment he got his inauguration came, he surrounded by all the swamp and never did a damn thing. So it would just be that again. Is my thing. Yeah, do I want completely awake people doing right things in the world? Yes. Is it going to happen? I don't think so. And my hope and my faith is in all of us.
And I think it's okay to be cynical as well about these things, because that also has been informed by our experience of these people and what they have and haven't done.
Lots of false saviors.
Absolutely. Thank you, Philly. Last 2 questions.
Thank you. No comedy. So just thinking about the idea of forgiveness, and I practice Nichiren Buddhism. I chant the mantra Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and the Buddhist outlook is that everybody is worthy of respect, and because the person is not their actions, and we're all eternal beings. Okay, now, that's a lovely idea, isn't it? Now I have a bit of a problem, maybe forgiving people like Tony Blair and Bill Gates, right? Maybe I'm not quite a perfect Buddhist yet, right? But on the other hand, if you look at it from the point of view of respect, a respectful way to behave towards another person is to give them an example of respect, i.e. that you respect yourself and you respect them. I mean, I think of it like this with the COVID thing. All the people who have been duped into taking the vaccine, I've got nothing but sympathy for them, right? And they should be respected and they should be supported. All those people that sadistically and really were, absolutely horrible, evil in the way that they attacked people that didn't agree with the narrative and didn't want to have the vaccine, like saying, Tony Blair, for instance, that if you don't take it, you're an idiot, right? All that coercion and manipulation that went on. And the thing in America where the guy on TV said that if two people come into hospital, we've only got one, but well, if you haven't taken the vaccine, you should basically die. We've heard that sort of thing. To me, it's not so much a matter of respect, it's a matter of who is there going to be an amnesty for? There should be an amnesty for all the people who were just genuinely deceived, right? And no amnesty for people like, for instance, Tony Blair and Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates. But that doesn't mean to say you don't respect them, right? Because I think, here's a question. What's the most respectful action you could take against Bill Gates and Tony Blair, for instance? I say the most respectful action you could take is to put them in prison, because that's how they'll learn the lessons they need to learn on their journey of life, right? That's the only way, because to just have no amnesty just gives carte blanche for the same thing to happen again in the future. And we have to stop this at cause and effect now. Yeah, and that's how you learn, right? And they've got to learn the lesson. Right. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. Thank you.
Hi guys, sorry, I've lost my voice. I've got a bit of a shameless plug. The lady over there who spoke earlier was mentioning about artists and why haven't they stood up and, channeled their art into something meaningful. There is a wonderful lady called Natalie Papamichael. Her artwork is very hard-hitting, very on point from our perspective, and you should all check her out and support her. Natalie Papamichael.
Natalie Papamichael. She has a website. She's on Facebook. She's on where? Instagram.
She's a visual
I could literally be promoting a fascist here without a clue of what I'm doing. Right. Oh, I like the sound of that.
There are a number of hated politicians' heads in baskets.
Right.
But she's an incredible artist.
Right.
It would be great if she could.
Bear in mind. Absolutely, thank you. Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you to all the panel. Thank you, Bob. Bob Moran. The lovely Brad from 5 Times August. Monotti. Lovely Darren, who's leading the light. Thank you from myself, Sonia Poulton, and I want you to give all yourself a round of applause. And thank you for making me feel less insane about myself. And thanks, of course, to Jam for Freedom. Thank you so much.
What's happening next?